And the report also says that commenting on elements of policing policy is extremist and far right. That is nonsense. Campaigning against rape gangs is not extremist or far right. And commenting on policing, whether you agree or not with the comments, is simply the exercise of free speech. So will the Minister categorically disown those remarks which were contained in the Home Secretary's report?
The insanity of the left-wing UK government has reached a new high. In a shocking revelation, a leaked Home Office report has labeled criticism of two-tier policing as a potential sign of far-right extremism. Now, this leaked report suggests that discussions around grooming gangs in the UK are an issue exploited by the far right to stir hatred against Muslims. Now, this alarming trend in the UK illustrates just how far rights are being eroded under the guise of maintaining a liberal social order. As Prime Minister Keir Starmer's approval ratings crashed to an all-time low, with a staggering 66% of the public seeing him unfavorably, the reaction from the government is to double down and crack down even harder on free speech. The UK government is also pushing for a new crime of what they call harmful communications. They're attempting to silence dissenting voices, all the while refusing to acknowledge the legitimate concerns of citizens, calling for accountability in policing. This obfuscation fuels the anger that many feel toward their elected representatives who seem so out of touch with public sentiment. Across the UK, instances of censorship and policing overreach are rising. We're witnessing a disastrous erosion of civil liberties as public outrage against these policies grows. Joining me today is Peter McIlvenna. He's the director and host of Hearts of Oak, a free speech alliance based in the UK. He's also served as Chief of Staff to Lord Pearson of Ronach in the House of Lords over the last 10 years. Peter, welcome. Great to see you again.
Dr. Steve, it's wonderful to join you on your show. Thank you for giving me the time today.
Oh, it's my honor. It's great to talk to a fellow patriot from across the pond. Just as some background for those who are just meeting you here, what inspired you to establish Hearts of Oak, and how has your mission evolved since its inception?
Well, my kind of time in London really has been 10 years in church, 5 years in politics, and now 5 years in media. I was very involved in UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, which was the party that Nigel Farage was there right at the beginning, that delivered Brexit. And he has now reformed that onto the Brexit Party and now Reform. They're doing exceptionally well in the polls. But I was heavily involved in politics. I was national campaign manager for UKIP in 2019 for the European parliamentary elections and for the local elections. And then after we delivered Brexit in some shape or form. That's a whole program in itself. But where do you go? What political party achieves its single aim? I don't know of any political party that had one aim that achieved it and then shuts up shop and goes home. Right. So we were in discussions what to do with UKIP. Should it become a populist party like what we were seeing across Europe, the rise of populism, or something different? And that whole debate was happening, and a group of us decided that we would start a organization that would have those town hall debates across the UK under the umbrella of freedom of speech. And we really wanted to focus on the clash that we are seeing between Islam in the West and also the sexualization of children all across the board in every area. And those kind of were our focus points. We launched, and then we went into worldwide lockdown 2 weeks later. Probably the stupidest time to launch an organization, but who knew? Well, that's another conversation. So we had all these events planned across the country, and we had to cancel them all. And we thought, well, let's start doing media. So 750 odd interviews later, 275 guests, of which you've been one, Steve, on 2 occasions. I've enjoyed having you on. and our reach is bigger and bigger. We have 3 shows a week, 2 guest interviews, and one news review with all different guests. And it's been exciting connecting, meeting people all over the world who share that same passion for free speech. And a lot of people that's undergirded by a Christian faith, by biblical principles that we've lost sight of in our society. And that's why I love your outlook, your view on the rise of not only nationalism, but also a rise of Christianity, because people have that hunger deep inside them. And it is only Christ where they find that. And we are seeing a rise of that in parts of Europe. It's coming behind the rise of populism, but I think the rise of populism will give Christians and churches the backbone, I think, which they have not had, and they'll be able to stand once again for their faith. So it's been an exciting 5 years, and it's changed quite a bit as we have gone on. But to me, it's that networking, the connection, the relationships, and realizing that what you can do together is so much more than what you can do separately.
Yes, that's so brilliantly put, Peter. Well, let's get into one of those issues in particular, and that's, of course, the major scandal that's rocked UK politics of late, the rape gang scandal. Peter, the more I learn about this, the more it absolutely infuriates me. It's a scandal that, as I understand, just goes back 30 years. Involves literally hundreds of thousands of victims over that time period, with the UK government basically covering it up. I would say both parties, you're a multi-party system there, but in a sense, both parties, both the Tories and Labour, are covering it up equally. How is this scandal being received in the UK? Is there a mass outrage? Is the media honestly reporting on it? What's your sense of the ethos of what's going on with it in the UK right now?
Well, we certainly have a uni party, absolutely. And there's no difference between 14 years of Tory rule that didn't conserve anything. And now we have a left-wing government, which really is just a little bit worse. It's just wokeism on more steroids, where the Tories were on just a little bit of steroids on wokeism. But the first case of this was in 1975 in a newspaper, the Rotherham Advertiser, and it had a story about a girl getting groomed and raped by a group of, they called it Asian men, and that was 1975. We have now had 430 plus individuals, 440 charged and sentenced for this in 40 towns across the UK, in well over 75 trials. And our authorities have turned a blind eye. Now, very few knew this was happening. It was a Labour MP, Anne Cryer, and in her area, up in Keighley, up in Yorkshire, up in the Midlands, she had lots of reports coming to her if this was happening, and that was 93. And then jump on, a journalist reported this in 97. Again, another journalist talked about it in 2002, but it was 2012 on the front page of the Times. Andrew Norfolk, a journalist, did a huge expose on this. And that was the first time kind of the UK was aware this was happening. Now, the figures are, Lord Pearson has talked in the House of Lords at 250,000 girls being raped. Now, Sarah Champion, who's the Labour MP, so on the left in Rotherham, she has talked about up to 1 million girls being affected. So these are huge figures. It's probably the biggest social scandal that we have had in the UK in 100 years. And the cover-up, and why is the cover-up? Now, I've been involved in highlighting this issue, me, for about 8 years. Lord Pearson has spoken about this in the House of Lords, one of the few to speak about it. And we are actually in the middle of a legal case for one of these girls to actually get money from her perpetrator, because no one has ever sued these rapists. They go to jail, they're imprisoned, often for horrendously short sentences, like her perpetrator, 2 cases of child rape, and they went to jail for 5.5 years, I think. 6 years, got out half of that time because of good behavior. What defines good behavior for someone like that? That's another conversation.
Another-
But these sentencing are so short, and the police turned a blind eye. The police destroyed evidence. These girls often came to them, filmed evidence, and then they destroyed it. The police arrested the fathers for going to the police to say this happened to our girls.
No, I know. I even read that they blamed the girls on occasions. I mean, or they would arrest there was that one girl. She was in that, what was it, a halfway house or something. They arrested her and they let all the rapists go free. It's just insane.
It's insane, and it was from above, because the police didn't want a race riot. That was the terminology, and that has been repeated a number of times. Child services knew it was happening. Again, they didn't want to highlight this. It wouldn't have helped their careers. Local politicians, we have a whole council in Rotherham. The whole council, the local politicians, 60 of them, they all resigned, and then they all went back into their jobs. So no one was actually punished for that. And the whole debate at the moment, there are two. One is Elon Musk. So for all our issues about Elon Musk on many issues like AI, transhumanism, huge issues with that, yet he is using X to shine a spotlight on this. And the 1st of January, I picked up my phone. I said, "Free Tommy Robinson." Yeah. And I stared at my phone. I've known Tommy for 16 years, and I thought I must be still sleeping. How is this happening? I'm staring at my phone and realized then that he was highlighting Tommy Robinson, who is probably the most famous political prisoner in the world now. And he has been jailed repeatedly for highlighting this issue, the failure to tackle these grooming gangs. And then he started going after the British government, Keir Starmer, two-tier Keir, which you touched on earlier. And it's an utter failure for politicians to address this. And this has now become a political football, with the Tories, Kemi Badenoch, saying, well, we need to do this. We need a public inquiry. We need investigation. I'm thinking, your government was there for 14 years, and you dismissed this. You had an independent inquiry, and it lasted 7 years. It cost £200 million. And not a single individual in the police or the public services or in politics was ever charged for turning a blind eye to these girls and sentenced. So it's this issue that the media bring out every so often. But what has happened now is Elon Musk has made this a world issue, and the world are looking at the UK thinking, how can you have let this happen? And of course, one of the big issues is, there are many. The last one is that Keir Starmer, the new British Prime Minister, was head of the Crown Prosecution Service between 2007 to 2013, I think, if I get my dates right. And the Crown Prosecution Service is like the in-between between the police and the courts. So the police have a crime, and then they would make recommendations, and then the Crown Prosecution Service decide whether that actually goes to court. Now, he was heading that for 6 years, and the questions are, what part did he play in this cover-up? So a lot of questions being asked. The media are reporting on this like never before. The world media are reporting on it. And the British government are trying to say, well, we're doing our best, but that really isn't happening.
I could say it, for some reason, I recall the first time I think Tommy got thrown into prison. The judge put a gag rule on the British media, and so almost all the media we were finding out that was reporting on it was from outside the UK, and so there's some, and then we have it here where our media will be completely would deliberately silent on the particular issue, and then thank God for the UK media, because they're coming in and saying, wait a minute, something's going on in the States here that we need to focus on. So we're kind of balancing each other out in one shape form here. Matthew, I do want to talk a little bit though about the free speech issues. Matt Goodwin, the political scholar, he's documented how 70% of the terrorist attacks inside the UK are perpetrated by radical Islamists. I think it's a comparable percentage. I think it was even higher. I think it's 80% when it came to the rapes. in terms of the convictions, looking at all the cases. You said, what is it, 430 cases, 40 towns, 75 trials, or 430 convictions, 40 towns, 75 trials. I think Peter, I'm sure you have the correct numbers there, but I think it's that high of a number. Yeah. That are Muslim. For me, I got, just personally as a dad, the Southport murders, the dance school. I mean, that dude, I was like, when I read about that and I saw the pictures of those 3 girls, I just freaked. That was rough for me to watch. But it appears that no one is allowed to talk about this in the UK or to discuss the implications of multiculturalism and the like. What do you believe is the biggest threat to freedom of expression in the UK today? And explain to our audience what you're facing here when it comes to freedom of expression. And if you can, how do you think you can counter whatever obstacles are being thrown your way?
Well, you gave some figures, and Peter McLaughlin, who wrote Easy Meat, which is the main book going through all the trials, that was published a couple of years ago, he talked about 91 or 92% were Muslim. We talk about Muslim Pakistani. Now, the concern is that we are not having a grown-up debate on why this is the case. I would suggest that when you have mass immigration, when you bring in other cultures and maybe beliefs that don't fit in with your freedoms, especially how you treat women and how you treat those who do not accept your faith, then you've got a clash. And who gives way? And we have now got 70-odd Sharia courts in the UK, Islamic courts. We've got Sharia finance, halal food. We've got a whole system that's now been built up around that. And we have very ghettoized societies, no integration at all. It's silos.
Very tribalistic. Yeah,
very much tribalistic. And I'm in London, and in London, you think it's a beautiful multicultural city. No, multiculturalism just means you've got ghettoized communities. That's all it means. And you go down a high street and you know what area you're in by the type of shops. Are they French shops? Are they shops with Arabic writing? Is it something else, an Italian shops? You kind of get a flavor of where you are. But we've had this massive clampdown. The case you referred to, Southport, was Axel Rudikabana, and he was an individual 16, I think, and then turned 17, or 17, then turned 18. And he had stabbed 3 girls dead and repeatedly stabbed others. I mean, when I listened to the court case, some of it, and there were many parts I could not listen to, and they talked about some girls being stabbed 30, 40, 50, 60 times. Yeah. So this was a frenzied attack. And when that happened, there was a shutdown of the media. The media were told you're not allowed to report on this. The police were told you're not allowed to ask the public for any information. So there was full shutdown, and that came from the top, from the government. So into that vacuum came discussions on social media, and people start saying, what is happening? Who is this? Is it an immigrant that's just come over in a boat? Is it a Muslim and he's doing that because of that? What is? And the most dangerous thing, I think, for any government is to produce a vacuum after a horrendous event like that, because then conversation, the favorite term of the government, ours and your previous one, misinformation or disinformation. And into that comes that. Now, we find out that the government knew that this individual, Axel, was looking at al-Qaeda manuals, that he had got a number of knives, that he had ricin, and just wanted to possibly release that into the population. There are all these things happening, and the public were unaware. And when the public got angry, because this was a problem because of mass immigration that we are seeing. People went out in the streets and people began to get angry. And we had 700-800 people arrested. Many of them are still in jail for sentences of like 26 months for a racist comment to a police dog, 26 months for throwing a tin of beer, 28 months for comments on Twitter or on Facebook. So it seemed as though the police were giving bigger sentences to this than
Sure.
we see anywhere else. And
Yeah.
in our society, only 98.5% of rape allegations actually go forward to prosecution. So only 1.5. Surely that's where the police should be spending their time. So you've got this whole shutdown. And of course, the big boogeyman was social media. This is the problem. It's not the problem people running around with knives stabbing people. The problem is social media. So there was a massive clampdown. The police said, we will come and find you. Even if you're abroad, we'll come and find you. And of course, Elon Musk had great fun with this because he said two-tier care. And the British government got very angry at that. So we doubled and tripled down and just kept posting what was happening. And Twitter, X, that shows how old we are, X, it became the spotlight for the world, the window for the world on what was happening with videos being disseminated everywhere. So we are in a very dangerous situation in the UK. I don't think you are where we are yet, or don't think you were where we currently are, which is restriction of conversations online. We've got the Online Communication Act, and that's been there for 25 years. That can prosecute you for saying anything which may cause offense to someone else. That has now been tightened up on the Online Safety Bill, which was brought in 18 months ago under a so-called conservative government. Europe have the Digital Services Act, which is more or less the same. And that basically criminalizes speech online. It says, Steve, if you say something that someone else may find offensive, then you're guilty. It doesn't matter if someone has been offended or not. If someone may be possibly offended.
Or they ought to be offended. It doesn't, right? Or just because they are offended doesn't mean what you said is offensive. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah.
And truth is no defense here. It's irrelevant. It's just people's feelings, and that fits into the multiculturalism society that we are, where, and again, moving away from biblical truth, where there is no truth, anything goes. Your truth is true for you, and maybe not for me. And of course, that fits into our education, and so this is a much wider issue. But we are seeing the biggest clampdown on the internet since the beginning of the internet. And police are being now told what is far right. Far right is talking about immigration, concern of immigration, or two-tier policing, or across the board. So at the moment in the UK, it's quite dark. But my hope and my expectation is looking at what is happening with you, with President Trump, only a week in office, and being a blizzard of activity, a whirlwind on the one side. And on the other side, you have got Europe. And I know you did a video, Steve, maybe a day or two ago on Elon Musk being at the FD conference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know. So that the German election is coming up in weeks. You've got the Freedom Party in Austria that came top, have now been asked if they can form a government. Of course, you've got Orban, you've got Maloney. What Maloney just talked about, pulling out of the WHO also. So you've got bright spots across Europe. And I think that pressure from the US and Europe will actually produce something in the UK, which is positive, because the moment we've got 4 years and 3 months of a Keir Starmer far left government, and they keep doubling down.
Yeah, they got doubling down for sure. That's a perfect pivot into my question for you, especially with your history with UKIP. So do you see this as possibly the Reform Party's moment? So yeah, I mean, the Tories are no longer fit for purpose. The Starmer Labour government is the most unpopular ever. Do you think we're going to see a major shakeup in Westminster?
I'm looking at it. I'm intrigued at the polling. The polling, obviously, Labour won by a landslide, 200-seat majority, the biggest majority in 100 years. Conservatives were decimated, the biggest defeat for 100 years. We've always been that two-party system, or have been for many generations. And into that vacuum steps Nigel Farage, and it was 25 years of UKIP until we got that referendum. So he knows what it is to stay at something and to work at something and to actually achieve it. But I don't, and Reform at the moment are polling, all the parties are polling neck and neck. Labour, Tories and Reform. One poll had Reform 1 point above the other two. And they've only got 5 MPs out of 650. So Nigel's done a phenomenal job with such few MPs because of our first past the post system that does not reward smaller parties. It's not like they have across Europe. But I also kind of wish that when Nigel had achieved Brexit in some shape or form, and he's done media, he's been on GB News, and I know he's a very public figure in the US on many different outlets. I kind of expected him to go into the media and do that, and that hasn't happened. My concern of reform is that President Trump, he says what he thinks. That one with Colombia, FAFO. I mean, beautiful. Now, would anyone in the UK would Nigel have posted that? No, he wouldn't. Yeah. So Nigel is more of a consensus politician.
I notice he backs away from Tommy Robinson and things like that. Yeah.
So this has been a massive clash, and I think this is I think this is a class issue. Simply,
yeah.
Tommy is working class, Nigel is middle class, and Nigel looks down. And Nigel has made a decision that he doesn't think Tommy will help him get the votes. Right. And there is an argument for that. I understand that. But I would like our political leaders just to do what they believe is right. I don't know whether that's naive. I don't think so. I've been in politics long enough to believe that you can do the right thing, but also you can weigh it off and you can do it correctly. You can decide what your message is. You can tweak it to different audiences, to different people, but it's the same message. Nigel obviously wants to be Prime Minister in 2029. And if I was a betting man, I think I would go down the bookies and put some money on that, because you possibly get very good odds. Who knows what's going to happen with the Conservative Party? Kemi Badenoch, 100 days in leading the Conservative Party, and she hasn't really made any traction on that. Keir Starmer, hugely disliked and a very weak leader, weak individual. So Nigel has the opportunity, but I kind of wish that he would have more conviction on some of these issues. And I also he talks about immigration, but he said no, he wouldn't send people back. The AfD have talked about remigration. President Trump, that's what you're doing, rounding them up. That's why you've got a borders are. If only we had a borders are. But so we don't have that strength. We don't have that strong message, and we don't have those convictions. And Nigel doesn't want to address the issue of Islam, that clash that we are having, that we've seen all across Europe. And I get that, because maybe it's a smarter thing and a wiser thing not to tackle it, because Islam often says it's a religion of peace, but it does seem to have a lot of violence and get quite angry when things are done that don't go its way. So maybe it is smarter. But someone like Tommy, he has got the convictions, but he is too tarred by the media. So even if out of prison, even if he was politically, I think he's better as a campaigner and not necessarily a political leader. But I really wish Nigel didn't throw Tommy under the bus. He didn't need to, and it was a knee-jerk reaction. And of course, he had that public spat with Elon Musk because of that.
Yes,
so
yes.
I don't know where we are going. We're in a better situation because Reform are polling so well, but they're not. They don't have the resources. They don't have the infrastructure, the branches, the setup across the country at the local level to really go for it. And I know that some individuals have left Reform who've been high profile, and the person who was running for Mayor of London, who I've just forgotten his name, Cox, he was running for Mayor of London, and he has left Reform, and the reason was, he said he's got no connection, no communication from head office at Reform. Wow. The only communication he got was a few weeks ago to say, don't talk about Tommy Robinson. So it's kind of on the back foot. So I kind of believe that even if Reform do well, they could do so much better if there was that conviction and more of the cutting edge.
Yeah, the full embracing of the civilizational populism, and that's what you're Peter, why I love your work so much. It's not just we the people versus the permanent political class, but we the people who are here to defend a particular civilization, as over and against these sort of globalist elites who will sell out our civilization just for their own political and economic power. It'll be interesting to see if reform could get their act together a bit more if Elon starts bankrolling them. I did see a little report on that, right? I'm sure you saw that Elon was thinking of throwing some pretty heavy money in reform's direction.
Yeah, and that could happen. Obviously, one time Nigel went over and I met Elon. That picture of Nigel Farage, Elon Musk, and Nick Candy. And Nick Candy was the treasurer of Reform, just come over the treasurer, a very rich financer. He owns properties all over the UK, worth $1 billion plus, which is not normal for the UK. So he has moved from the Tories over to Reform, and that was a really big coup for Reform. But the flip side is that Elon Musk's father says Tommy Robinson could be prime minister in 2029. Right. It's kind of you have to sit back and you have to smile at it because
that's what I mean. I just think so. Nigel might say, "Oh no, I don't want to talk about Tommy Robinson." Don't want to, and then all of a sudden he looks at the check that Elon Musk writes to him and he goes, Tommy Robinson must be freed right now. Politicians, they could turn literally on a dime, right? So, or a pound, as it were.
Or a pound.
Just practically speaking, Peter, how do you navigate potential censorship while hosting Hearts of Oak content on mainstream platforms?
Well, being kind of new, I mean, I'd never done interview. I'd done, I think, one interview in my life before. So you kind of jump in and you learn. And we've got a great volunteer team that we've all learned on the job. And that's the best way to do it. And Steve, I know your background is not media either. So we've all kind of come to this from different angles. But you look at censorship, and the UK is... We've had journalists rounded up on a number of occasions and charged. The government are using the Terrorism Act against journalists as well. I know Tommy has been charged under the terrorism offence, which means he has to give up all his devices. He's not allowed to remain silent. He must answer every question. And they interrogate him for 3 hours plus, non-stop. I have another friend who is a travel journalism, and he came back to the country from the States a few days ago. He was stopped under the Terrorism Act, everything taken off him. He was interrogated. He travels and does travelogues all over the world. He's been to Ukraine. He's been to Zimbabwe. He's been over to Russia. He's all Poland, all different places. So the legislation the government have is extremely dangerous and dubious. But what do you do? What do you do? In one way, we learned early on, especially during COVID, our first video, the first video that got removed on YouTube, we had a guest on, a Swedish journalist, talking about vitamin D being important during that time. And it's good to get sunshine. That was removed for medical misinformation.
Unbelievable.
I didn't know if vitamin D was bad, or I don't think even you can overdose. I mean, I take very high strength vitamin D tablets. So, and then it went on and on. You didn't know where the goalposts were. So in the end, we had to delete everything from YouTube. And I think we were kind of targeted maybe early on for saying that, maybe not being as wise as others may have been. And then we slowly put videos back on YouTube. We can't get monetized on YouTube, so that's removed. Of course, Elon Musk buying Twitter, buying X, that has opened up that to many people. We stream on other things. We stream on Rumble, we stream on the website, and we've had a great relationship with Steve Bannon on War Room. So we stream on War Room, on Rumble and Getter there. And you notice, like, you're looking for opportunities and ways to disseminate information, whether it's using Substack, whether it's a good old email list, whether it's using different apps. And you kind of have to keep working your way. And you realize that actually the enemy is the government. because they do not want free speech. The British government would love for everyone to be getting their news from the BBC, and then that's fully controlled. That is no longer the case. And our government, as many governments, don't know what to do with that freedom. And there is clampdowns, but you kind of go with it. And again, I would go back to my faith, that my line just is, well, God has my back, and this is what I'm doing. And you go forward in confidence, trusting that he will look after what we do. What we do is try and speak truth on such a range of issues, whether it's on Israel, whether it's on MEPs in Europe, whether it's on actors, whether there's so many areas that you end up, because you just have a wide range of interests. And Stephen, right, probably same for you, get different topics or different guests, and you end up going down rabbit holes all over the place, and you learn so much. And it's not just restricted on the pure political side or the pure social side, or but it becomes much wider. So you just kind of go with what happens, you go with what's in front of you, and you kind of try and exercise a little bit of wisdom in what you say.
Yeah, I couldn't concur more. It's exactly what we have to do. You have to exercise that wisdom. But yeah, it just seems we're just in a new era now where they can't control it. Every time they think they can control the communications, we end up finding another way of just bypassing that control. But I like to say we're able to bypass the legacy media now today in a manner comparable to the way email and texting bypasses the post office, as it were. Again, they could try to clamp down on the email and the texting all they want. We'll always find some way around it. Peter, how can people keep in touch with your work? It's wonderful. Again, I love how you focus on the whole of the Western civilization. How can people keep up with you?
So our shows are every Monday and Thursday. We have guest interviews, and every Saturday we have a news review at 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can find us at Hearts of Oak UK on X, or at Hearts of Oak everywhere else. And we stream on the website, which is heartsofoak.org. So all different places to find us, but heartsofoak.org/connect. You can go there and it lists all the places you can find us.
Absolutely. And we'll just have all the links down below. Check out Peter's podcast, his X profile, for these very deep insights week after week, and stay informed about the fight for liberty in Europe and all throughout the West. Again, the links are down in the description below. Peter, thank you so much. Great to see you again. Let's chat soon, real soon.
It's an honor to be on your show, Dr. Steve Turley. Thank you so much.
The honor's all ours, Peter. Thank you.